The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that made people feel safe without even thinking about it. Every morning, the same routine played out like a clock that never failed. Children walked to school in small groups, laughing and pushing each other along the sidewalk. Parents waved goodbye from their doors before heading off to work. Old men sat outside small shops, talking about the news and watching the world pass by. It was a normal neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. In the middle of this calm street stood a row of simple houses, each one almost the same as the other. Clean walls, small gardens, and doors that were often left unlocked during the day. People trusted each other here. They believed they knew everyone, and among them lived a man who seemed just like the rest. His name was Daniel. Daniel was not the kind of person who stood out. He was quiet but polite, always greeting his neighbors with a small smile. He worked from home, which made people think he had a good job, maybe something in computers or business. No one really asked too many questions, because he paid his bills on time and never caused trouble. To everyone around him, he was just another ordinary man trying to live a peaceful life. Every morning, Daniel followed a simple routine. He woke up early, made coffee, and stood by his window looking out at the street. Sometimes he watched the children going to school. Other times, he simply stood there, still and silent, as if thinking deeply about something no one else could see. Then he would sit at his desk, turn on his computer, and begin his work. From the outside, nothing about his life seemed unusual. His house was always clean, almost too clean. There were no decorations, no family photos, no signs of personal memories. Just plain walls, simple furniture, and a desk filled with neatly arranged items. Everything had its place, and nothing was ever out of order. It gave the feeling that Daniel liked control, that he didn't like surprises or chaos. Neighbors often described him as a good man. He helped carry groceries for the elderly woman next door. He fixed a broken fence for a family across the street. He even once found a lost dog and returned it to its owner. Small acts of kindness that made people trust him more. No one would ever imagine that behind that calm face, something else might exist. But there were moments, small and easy to miss, that didn't quite fit. Sometimes, late at night, a faint light could be seen through Daniel's window. Not the soft glow of a lamp, but the sharp flicker of screens turning on and off. A neighbor once noticed strange shadows moving inside, like someone pacing back and forth for hours. Another time, a delivery truck stopped outside his house at an unusual hour, unloading boxes that were quickly taken inside. No one talked about these things seriously. People noticed, then forgot. After all, everyone has their own life, their own habits. It was easy to explain it away. He works late, someone would say. Maybe he orders things online, another would add. And that was enough. But there was one person who paid a little more attention. Across the street lived a young woman named Sarah. She had moved into the neighborhood only a few months earlier. Unlike the others, she did not grow up there. She did not have years of trust built around the people. She observed things more carefully, noticing details that others ignored. At first, she thought Daniel was just quiet. But over time, she began to feel something she could not fully explain. It was not fear exactly, but a strange sense that something about him was hidden. She would sometimes see him standing at his window, looking out, but not really looking at anything. His eyes seemed distant, focused on something far away. One evening, as she was returning home, she saw Daniel outside his house. He was talking on the phone, his voice low and serious. When he noticed her, he quickly ended the call and gave his usual polite smile. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," Sarah replied, but something in his tone stayed with her. It did not sound like the voice of the calm, helpful neighbor everyone knew. That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about it. Days passed, and life in the neighborhood continued as always. Children played, neighbors talked, and everything seemed normal. But slowly, small things began to stand out more clearly. The late-night lights, the quiet deliveries. The way Daniel always seemed to be watching, even when he looked relaxed. It was like a puzzle with missing pieces, and Sarah could feel that something important was hidden just beneath the surface. Then one night, something happened that made everything harder to ignore. A loud noise broke the silence of the street. Not loud enough to wake everyone, but sharp enough to catch attention. Sarah stepped out onto her balcony and looked around. The street was empty, the lights dim, the air still. And then she saw it. Daniel's door was slightly open. That was unusual. He was not careless. He never left things out of place. The light inside his house flickered, casting strange shadows on the floor. Sarah hesitated. Something inside her told her to go back inside, to forget what she had seen. But another part of her, stronger and more curious, made her stay. She kept watching, her eyes fixed on that half-open door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the door moved. Not wide open, not closed, just a slight movement, as if someone inside had touched it. Sarah felt a chill run through her. She didn't know why, but in that moment, the quiet, peaceful neighborhood no longer felt the same. It felt like something had shifted, like the normal life everyone believed in was only a surface hiding something deeper and darker. And as she stood there, watching in silence, she began to realize that the man everyone trusted, the man who smiled and helped and lived so quietly among them, might not be who they thought he was at all. And what she would discover next would begin to reveal just how far the truth really went. The days after that night did not feel the same for Sarah. The neighborhood still looked calm and normal, but now she noticed things she had never paid attention to before. It was like her eyes had opened to something hidden. Every small detail began to matter, especially when it came to Daniel. The morning after she saw his door slightly open, she looked across the street as she usually did. Daniel's house looked exactly the same as always. The door was closed. The windows were clean. There was no sign that anything unusual had happened the night before. It made Sarah question herself for a moment. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe she had just been tired. But deep inside, she knew what she had seen. Later that day, she saw Daniel outside. He was watering the small plants in front of his house. His movements were calm and steady, just like always. When he noticed Sarah looking, he gave her the same polite smile. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," Sarah replied, trying to sound normal. There was nothing strange in his voice, no sign of stress or worry. If anything had happened the night before, he was hiding it very well. That made Sarah feel even more uneasy. It was too normal, too perfect. As the days passed, Sarah began to observe more carefully. She didn't want to seem suspicious, so she acted like everything was normal. But inside, she was paying attention to every movement Daniel made. She noticed that he often received deliveries, but not like normal people. The packages were not left at his door during the day. Instead, they arrived late in the evening, sometimes even close to midnight. The delivery drivers never stayed long. They would knock once, and Daniel would open the door almost immediately, as if he had been waiting. The boxes were always the same size, medium, plain, with no clear labels. Daniel would quickly take them inside and close the door. No one else in the neighborhood seemed to notice or care. One evening, Sarah decided to take a short walk, hoping to see more. As she passed by Daniel's house, she slowed down just a little. The curtains were slightly open, just enough for her to see a small part of the room inside. What she saw made her stop. Daniel was not sitting at a normal desk like she had imagined. Instead, there were multiple screens in front of him, all showing different things. Some looked like maps, others like numbers or charts. His face was serious, focused, completely different from the calm neighbor she saw during the day. Before she could look longer, Daniel suddenly turned his head toward the window. Sarah quickly looked away and kept walking, her heart beating faster. She felt like she had almost been caught, even though she wasn't doing anything wrong. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying everything she had seen. The late deliveries, the strange screens, the way Daniel had looked at the window, almost like he knew someone was watching him. The next day, something else happened. A police car drove slowly through the neighborhood. That was not common. This was a quiet area, and police rarely came around unless something serious had happened. The car did not stop, but it moved slowly, as if the officers were looking for something or someone. Sarah watched from her window, her thoughts racing. Was it connected to Daniel? Or was it just a coincidence? Later that afternoon, she overheard two neighbors talking. "I heard something happened in the next town," one said. "Yes, some kind of robbery," the other replied. "They say it was very organized." Sarah listened carefully. "Organized how?" the first neighbor asked. "They don't know much yet, but it seems like whoever did it planned everything perfectly. No mistakes, no clear clues." Sarah felt a cold feeling in her chest. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she couldn't ignore the thought that came into her mind. Daniel worked from home. He had multiple screens. He stayed up late at night, and now there was news of a perfectly planned crime nearby. It could still be nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing anymore. That evening, Sarah sat by her window again. She tried to focus on something else, but her eyes kept moving back to Daniel's house. The lights were on, as usual. Everything looked calm. Then, just like before, a delivery truck appeared. It stopped quietly in front of his house. A man stepped out carrying a box. He walked to the door and knocked once. The door opened almost instantly. Daniel stood there, his face half hidden by the light inside. He took the box without saying much, then closed the door. But this time, something was different. As the door closed, Sarah noticed a small detail. Inside the house, near the wall, she saw something that looked like a metal case. It was open for just a second, but it looked heavy, serious, not like something used for normal work. Her heart started beating faster again. What was Daniel really doing inside that house? The more she thought about it, the less everything made sense. His life didn't match the simple image everyone believed in. There was something bigger, something hidden behind his quiet routine. That night, the lights in Daniel's house stayed on longer than usual. Hours passed, and still, the faint glow of the screens could be seen through the window. Shadows moved across the walls, slow and careful, like someone working on something important. Sarah sat in the dark, watching, thinking, trying to understand. She didn't have proof. She didn't have answers, but she had a feeling, growing stronger with each passing day, that something was very wrong. And somewhere inside that quiet house, behind those clean walls and polite smiles, a secret was slowly beginning to show itself, a secret that was no longer as hidden as it once was. Sarah tried to go back to her normal life, but it was no longer easy. Every time she looked across the street, she felt that same quiet tension building inside her. Daniel was still the same on the outside, calm, polite, and helpful. But now she could not unsee the small details that made him different. It was like watching a play where one actor knew a secret that the others didn't. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared and the street grew quiet, Sarah made a decision. She needed to understand what was really going on. Not because she wanted trouble, but because the feeling inside her would not go away. It was stronger now, more real. She waited until it was late, until most of the lights in the neighborhood were off. The street was silent, with only the soft sound of wind moving through the trees. Daniel's house, however, still had that familiar glow. The flicker of screens could be seen again through the small gap in the curtains. Carefully, Sarah stepped outside. Her heart was beating fast, but she told herself to stay calm. She walked slowly, trying not to make any noise. Each step felt louder than it should have, even though the ground was soft beneath her feet. When she reached the side of Daniel's house, she stopped for a moment. She listened. Nothing. No voices, no music, just silence. She moved closer to the window, just enough to see inside. What she saw this time was clearer than before. Daniel was sitting in front of a large desk surrounded by multiple screens. But now she could see more detail. One screen showed a map with different points marked on it. Another displayed numbers that changed quickly, like some kind of system tracking something in real time. A third screen showed what looked like camera views, different places, different angles, all moving slightly. Sarah felt a chill. This was not normal work. This was something planned, something controlled. Daniel leaned forward, his face serious, his eyes focused. He typed quickly, then stopped, watching the screens as if waiting for something. After a few seconds, he nodded slightly, like a person who had just confirmed something important. Then he reached for something on the table. It was a small device, something Sarah could not fully see, but it looked advanced, not something used for simple home tasks. He pressed a button, and one of the screens changed instantly. A new image appeared. This time, Sarah could clearly see it. It was a building, a large one, with lights outside and a quiet entrance. It looked like a place that held something valuable, maybe a bank or a secure office. Her breath caught. Was Daniel watching this place in real time? Before she could think further, something else caught her attention. On the table, near Daniel's hand, was a metal case, the same kind she had seen before through the door. This time, it was open. Inside, there were items carefully placed in order. Some looked like tools, others like small electronic parts. And then, she saw something that made her step back slightly. A gun. It was placed neatly inside the case, as if it belonged there, as if it was just another tool. Sarah's mind raced. This was no longer just a strange feeling. This was something real, something serious. Daniel was not just a quiet man working from home. He was planning something big, something dangerous. She took a step back, her heart pounding. She knew she should leave, that she had already seen too much. But before she could move away completely, Daniel suddenly stopped what he was doing. He turned his head slowly, not toward the screen, toward the window, toward her. Sarah froze. For a moment, everything felt still. She could not tell if he had actually seen her or if he was just reacting to a sound. His eyes stayed fixed in that direction, calm but sharp. Then, slowly, he stood up. Sarah didn't wait. She turned and moved quickly, trying not to run but no longer walking slowly either. She reached her house and closed the door behind her, her hands shaking slightly. Inside, she leaned against the wall, trying to breathe normally. Had he seen her? Did he know? Her mind was full of questions, but one thing was clear now. Daniel was hiding something much bigger than anyone in the neighborhood could imagine. That night, Sarah could not sleep at all. Every small sound made her alert. Every shadow in her room felt different. She kept thinking about the screens, the maps, the camera views, and most of all, the gun. The next morning, everything looked normal again. Daniel was outside, just like always, acting as if nothing had happened. He greeted a neighbor, helped someone carry a bag, even smiled when he saw Sarah. But this time, Sarah noticed something new. His eyes. They were still calm, still friendly on the surface, but there was something deeper behind them, something controlled, something that made her feel like he was always thinking, always planning. It was like he was living two lives at the same time, one that everyone could see, and another that no one was supposed to discover. As the day went on, Sarah realized that what she had seen was only the beginning. Daniel was not acting alone. The systems, the tools, the planning, it all pointed to something larger, something organized. This was not a simple secret. This was a hidden operation. And now, without meaning to, she had become a part of it. Because once you see something like that, once you understand that the quiet man next door might be controlling something dangerous from the shadows, there is no going back to normal. And somewhere behind those calm smiles and quiet routines, Daniel was already moving forward with his plan. A plan that was growing closer to becoming real with every passing moment. The next few days felt heavier than before, as if the air in the neighborhood had changed. Everything still looked the same on the outside, but Sarah could feel that something deeper was moving beneath the surface. She now knew that Daniel was not just hiding a secret. He was building something. Something planned, something careful, and something dangerous. She tried to act normal, but it was becoming harder. Every time she stepped outside, she felt like she was being watched, even when no one was looking at her. And every time she saw Daniel, her mind went back to that night. The screens, the maps, the weapon, and the look in his eyes when he turned toward the window. But now, something else was happening. The crimes were getting closer. At first, it had been news from another town. A robbery, well-planned, clean, with no clear clues. But now, people in the neighborhood were starting to talk more. There were whispers about another incident, this time much nearer. A secure storage building had been broken into during the night. Nothing was damaged, no alarms were triggered, and yet valuable items were gone. "It's like they knew everything," one neighbor said. "They must have had inside information," another replied. Sarah listened quietly, her thoughts racing. Inside information, that matched what she had seen. Daniel's screens had shown live images. His maps had marked locations. He wasn't just planning randomly. He was studying, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. And now, it was happening. That evening, Sarah stayed inside, but she kept her lights off. She sat near her window, watching Daniel's house again. The glow of his screens was stronger than usual. The shadows inside moved quickly, not like before. There was energy now, urgency. Then, something new happened. A car pulled up quietly in front of his house. It was not a delivery truck this time. It was a dark car with tinted windows. The engine stayed running as a man stepped out. He moved quickly, looking around once before walking to Daniel's door. Daniel opened it almost immediately. The two men did not speak outside. They just looked at each other for a second, then went inside together. Sarah's heart started beating faster, so Daniel was not alone. This was bigger than she thought. She leaned closer to the window, trying to see more. The curtains in Daniel's house were not fully closed, leaving small gaps of light. Through one of those gaps, she saw movement. The two men stood near the desk, looking at the screens. Daniel pointed at something on one of them, then at the metal case. The other man nodded, his body tense, focused. This was not a casual meeting. This was planning. After a few minutes, the second man opened the metal case. Sarah could not see everything clearly, but she saw enough. The items inside were carefully arranged: tools, small devices, and again, the gun. The man picked it up, checked it quickly, then placed it back. They were preparing. Sarah felt a cold fear settle inside her. This was real. This was happening. She watched as the two men continued to talk, their movements calm but serious. They were not rushed, not nervous. They moved like people who had done this before, people who trusted their plan. After some time, the man left the house. He got back into the car, and it drove away quietly, disappearing into the night. Daniel remained inside. The lights stayed on. The screens continued to flicker. But now, something felt different. The plan was no longer just an idea. It was moving forward. The next day, the news spread quickly. Another crime. This time, it was bigger. A high-security office building had been targeted during the night. Just like before, there was no sign of forced entry, no alarms, no mistakes. And yet, something important had been taken. People were shocked. "How is this even possible?" someone asked. "It doesn't make sense," another said. But to Sarah, it made perfect sense. She had seen the preparation. She had seen the planning. She had seen the calm, controlled way Daniel worked. And now, she understood something even more frightening. Daniel was not just involved, he was in control. Every move, every step, every detail. It all connected back to him. That afternoon, Sarah saw him again outside his house. He looked exactly the same as always. Calm, polite, ordinary. But now she could not see him that way anymore. Now she saw the truth behind the mask. A man who could plan crimes without leaving a trace. A man who could live among people without raising suspicion. A man who was always one step ahead. As the day went on, Sarah noticed something else. A police car returned to the neighborhood. This time it did not just pass by, it stopped. 2 officers stepped out and began talking to people, asking questions. Their faces were serious. They were looking for something, trying to understand how these crimes were happening. Sarah watched carefully. Part of her wanted to tell them everything she had seen, but another part of her hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if she could not prove it? Or worse, what if Daniel found out? That thought sent a chill through her body. Because if Daniel was capable of planning all this, if he could control such complex operations without being caught, then he was not someone to take lightly. He was dangerous, and he was close. Very close. That night, the neighborhood felt different again. The silence was heavier, filled with tension. People stayed inside more. Doors were locked earlier. Conversations were quieter. But inside Daniel's house, the lights burned bright. The screens flickered. The shadows moved. And somewhere behind those walls, the next step was already being prepared. Because what Sarah had seen so far was only part of something much larger. A network of actions, people, and plans that were still unfolding, still growing, and slowly moving toward something even bigger that had not yet revealed itself. The tension in the neighborhood was no longer something only Sarah could feel. It had spread to everyone. People locked their doors earlier, spoke in lower voices, and looked at strangers with more caution. The peaceful street that once felt safe now carried a quiet fear that no one wanted to say out loud. But while others were just beginning to worry, Sarah was already deep inside the truth. She had seen too much, and now she knew she could not ignore it any longer. For days she had gone back and forth in her mind, asking herself the same question again and again. Should she tell the police? At first, fear stopped her. She had no strong proof, only what she had seen through windows and small details she had noticed. But the crimes were getting bigger, and they were getting closer. Waiting was no longer safe. One afternoon, as she watched the police officers once again moving slowly through the neighborhood, she made her decision. She stepped outside. Her hands felt slightly cold, but she forced herself to walk forward. The officers were speaking to a man across the street. When they finished, Sarah approached them carefully. "Excuse me," she said. The 2 officers turned toward her. "Yes?" one of them replied. "I think I might have seen something," she said, her voice quiet but steady. They listened as she explained everything. The late-night deliveries, the screens, the strange meetings, the metal case, the gun. She tried to remember every detail clearly, even the smallest ones. The officers did not interrupt her. They exchanged quick looks as she spoke, their expressions becoming more serious with each moment. "Are you sure about what you saw?" one of them asked. "Yes," Sarah replied. "I know how it sounds, but something is not right." There was a short silence. Then one officer nodded. "Thank you," he said. "You did the right thing." From that moment, things began to change. The police did not act immediately in an obvious way. They did not go straight to Daniel's house or make a scene. Instead, they became quieter, more careful. They started watching. And Sarah noticed. Unmarked cars appeared at different times of the day, parking at a distance but always with a clear view of the street. People who looked like ordinary pedestrians walked by more often, but their eyes moved differently, always observing. The investigation had begun. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his routine. If he noticed anything, he did not show it. He still stepped outside in the mornings. He still greeted neighbors. He still acted like nothing had changed. But now, Sarah wondered if he already knew. Because someone like him, someone so careful and controlled, would not miss small changes. And if he did know, then he was already planning his next move. One night, the situation became even more intense. Sarah was sitting in her room when she saw movement outside. A dark car, different from the previous one, slowly stopped near Daniel's house. The lights were off, and it stayed quiet for a moment before someone stepped out. This time, there were two men. They moved quickly, heading straight for Daniel's door. But something else caught Sarah's attention. Across the street, in the shadows, another car sat still. Inside it, she could see the faint outline of someone watching. The police. Her heart started beating faster. This was it. Everything was coming together. Daniel opened the door, and the two men entered. The house lights grew brighter. Shadows moved quickly behind the curtains. Inside, something was happening. Outside, the street remained silent. Minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly, the front door opened again. One of the men stepped out, looking tense. He glanced around quickly, then spoke to someone inside. His movements were sharper now, less calm than before. Something had changed. Inside the police car, there was movement too. The figures shifted, watching more closely now. Then, without warning, everything sped up. The second man came out of the house, carrying something. A bag, heavy and full. Daniel followed behind him. For the first time, Sarah saw him move differently. He was not calm. He was alert. His eyes scanned the street quickly, as if searching for something. For a moment, his gaze passed across the area where the police car was hidden. He froze. It was only for a second, but it was enough. He knew. Everything happened at once. The men rushed toward their car. The engine started loudly. At the same time, the police car lights flashed on, breaking the darkness with bright color. "Stop!" a voice shouted. The quiet street exploded into action. The suspects jumped into their car, trying to escape. Tires screeched as the vehicle sped forward. The police car followed immediately, sirens cutting through the night. Sarah stood frozen at her window, watching it all unfold. But Daniel did not get into the car. He stepped back. For a moment, he stood alone in front of his house, his face calm again, but his eyes sharp and focused. Then, slowly, he turned. Not toward the street, but back toward his house. Sarah's breath caught. Why wasn't he running? Why was he going back inside? The police car chased the others down the street, leaving the area behind. The noise faded quickly, returning the neighborhood to a strange, heavy silence. And in that silence, Daniel disappeared into his house. The door closed. The lights inside flickered once, then went steady. Sarah felt a deep, uneasy feeling rise inside her. Something was wrong, very wrong. The police had chased the others, but Daniel, the one who planned everything, the one who stayed calm even now, was still there. And somehow, it felt like this was not the end of anything. It felt like he had expected this, like this was only part of a larger plan. And as the night grew darker and the street returned to silence, Sarah realized that the most dangerous part of this story had not yet been uncovered, and whatever Daniel was about to do next would change everything in a way no one was ready for. The night did not end when the police cars disappeared down the street. For Sarah, it felt like everything had only just begun. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unnatural, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Daniel was still inside his house. That fact stayed in Sarah's mind, repeating over and over. The others had run. The police had chased them. But the man who planned everything, the man who stayed calm through every moment, had chosen to go back inside instead of escaping. That meant one thing. He still had control. Sarah stayed by her window, watching closely. The lights inside Daniel's house were still on. Shadows moved slowly across the walls, but not in a panicked way. There was no rushing, no signs of fear. If anything, it looked like he was continuing something he had already started. Minutes passed, then more. The street remained quiet. No police returned. No neighbors came outside. Everyone was either asleep or too afraid to get involved. But Sarah could not move. Then suddenly, the lights inside Daniel's house went off. Everything went dark. For a moment, there was nothing. No movement, no sound, just darkness. Sarah leaned forward, trying to see anything in the shadows. And then, the back door opened. It was slow, careful, almost silent. Daniel stepped out. He was dressed differently now, in darker clothes, blending into the night. He carried something in his hand, a small bag, not too large, but clearly important. Sarah's heart started racing. He had planned this, the escape, the backup plan. While the others distracted the police, he stayed behind, waiting for the right moment to leave unnoticed. Daniel paused for a second, looking around. His movements were calm, controlled, just like always. Then he started walking, not toward the main street, but toward the narrow path behind the houses. Sarah reacted without thinking. She grabbed her phone. Her hands shook as she quickly called the police. "He's still here," she whispered urgently. "He's escaping from the back." The voice on the other side responded quickly, telling her to stay inside and not follow. Help was already on the way. But Sarah did not move away from the window. She watched as Daniel disappeared into the darkness behind the houses. For a few seconds, she thought she had lost him completely. Then she saw movement again, further down the path. He was moving fast now, but still controlled. Not running wildly, but with purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going. In the distance, the faint sound of sirens began to return. Daniel heard it too. He stopped. For the first time, he hesitated. Then he turned slightly, looking back toward the neighborhood. And in that moment, for just a second, his eyes met Sarah's through the distance and darkness. It was brief, but it was real. There was no smile this time, no polite expression, just a cold, clear understanding. He knew, not just that the police were coming, but that someone had seen him, that someone had spoken. And then, just as quickly, he turned and continued moving. The sirens grew louder. Lights flashed in the distance. Police cars approached from different directions, cutting off the exits. Daniel reached the end of the path, where it opened to a wider road. He stopped again, looking left and right. There was no easy way out. The police were closing in. For the first time, his perfect control was being tested. Officers stepped out of their vehicles, their voices firm and clear. "Stop! Don't move!" The night that had been so quiet was now filled with sound. Sirens, footsteps, commands. Daniel stood still. For a moment, it seemed like he might try to run again, but he didn't. Slowly, he raised his hands. The small bag dropped to the ground. Officers moved in quickly, surrounding him. Within seconds, he was in custody. It was over. But it did not feel like a victory. As the police secured the area, one of them picked up the bag Daniel had been carrying. Inside were documents, devices, and items that would later reveal just how deep his operation had gone. Plans, records, connections, proof of a network much larger than anyone had imagined. Back in the neighborhood, people began to step outside, drawn by the noise and flashing lights. Confused faces turned into shock as the truth slowly spread. "Daniel?" someone whispered. "It can't be." But it was. The quiet man. The helpful neighbor. The one no one suspected. He was the mastermind behind it all. Sarah stood at her window, watching as they took him away. Her heart was still racing, but now it carried a different feeling. Not just fear, but something heavier, understanding. Because what made it so frightening was not just what Daniel had done, it was how normal he had seemed, how easily he had lived among them, how close danger had been, hiding behind a simple smile and a quiet routine. In the days that followed, the full story began to come out. The crimes were connected, the planning was precise, the network reached further than anyone expected, and at the center of it all was the man who had lived next door, unnoticed. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but it was never quite the same. People locked their doors more carefully. They looked at each other a little differently, and they remembered. Because sometimes, the most dangerous people are not the ones who stand out. Sometimes, they are the ones who blend in perfectly. The ones who live quietly, watch closely, and wait patiently until the moment comes to reveal who they really are.